Metro 2033. The surface is dead. Moscow is just bones now. Radioactive, silent, and crawling with things that forgot how to be human. So the survivors went underground, into the metro tunnels, into the dark. And that's where the real horror begins. See, Metro 2033 isn't about monsters. Not really. It's about how humanity shrinks itself to fit into survival. About a boy named Artyom, a kid with wide eyes and a secret, one that could destroy what's left of everything. Every station is a kingdom now, a checkpoint, a cult, a prison. People worship broken machines, revive long-dead ideologies, and build societies out of whatever they can still remember. Nazis run one line, communists run another. And in between, cannibals, bandits, madness. To travel through it all is to walk through the warped skeleton of civilization, still twitching. But the real enemy isn't above ground. It's in your head. The dark ones are coming. Mutated, silent creatures with eyes that see more than just light. They speak without sound. They reach into you. And they want something. Artyom is sent to destroy them. Simple mission. Big gun. Go save your people. But every step forward makes him question if the enemy is really what he's been told, if the monsters are even monsters, or if the real virus is the fear that made everyone crawl into holes and call it home. Metro 2033 isn't a horror story. It's a funeral march for trust, for truth, for everything noble that didn't fit inside the tunnels. You'll find shadows here, not just outside your flashlight beam, but in the way people trade bullets like currency. In the quiet rules that say, don't go to that station, they don't come back right. It's not about winning, no one's rebuilding the world. It's about decay in slow motion. The kind that doesn't scream, it whispers. Survive. And in the end, when Artyom finally faces what he was sent to destroy, he realizes he's already destroyed it. Because when you live in the dark long enough, you stop recognizing the light. The plague dogs. Rolf is drowning, but they keep bringing him back, because that's the experiment. That's the test. They drown him, resuscitate him, and do it again. Not to cure him, not to learn something vital, just to see how long it takes before his mind snaps. Next door, Snitter's brain has already been tampered with. They cut into it. Adjusted it. He's not even sure what's real anymore. Voices whisper. Hallucinations bleed into sunlight. And somewhere, deep down, he knows. He's broken. Both dogs escape. That sounds like a victory, right? Two animals breaking out of a research facility in the English countryside. A glimmer of hope. But there's a catch. Rumor spreads that the dogs might be infected. With something dangerous, maybe the plague, maybe worse. And so the countryside turns cold. Villagers become hunters. Helicopters hover. And men with rifles close in. Rolf and Snitter don't understand the rules. They don't know what plague is. They just want to live. Find scraps of food. Sleep in the grass. Maybe find someone kind. Instead, they're hunted like monsters. And here's the horror. The book never lets you forget they're just dogs. They don't have grand plans. They don't know why this is happening. They only know hunger, cold, fear, and abandonment. Snitter still dreams of his old owner, the man who loved him, the man who vanished, the man who, maybe, threw him away. He doesn't know the truth, but he knows the ache. The Plague Dogs is brutal, not because of gore or death or violence. It's brutal because of its silence, because of how it portrays pain that can't be explained, suffering without meaning. Animals that were loyal, now running for their lives because science wanted data. There's no villain in a lab coat twirling a mustache, just institutions, just systems that chew up life and call it research. And in the end, when the hills grow quiet and the dogs look out across the water, you'll ask yourself one question. What did they ever do wrong? Battle Royale. A classroom of 15-year-olds, laughing, whispering, passing notes. Then the bus windows go black. When they wake up, they're on an island, with steel collars on their necks, and one rule hanging in the air like a noose. Only one of you gets to leave. This isn't a war zone. It's a government program. Routine. Efficient. Every year, a random class is chosen, dropped into a death game, forced to murder their friends, their crushes, their seatmates, and it's televised. The collars will explode if they try to run. The zones change daily. The clock ticks down, and each student is handed a weapon. Could be a gun, could be a fork, could be a frying pan. Because this isn't about fairness, it's about obedience. Shuya just wanted to play guitar. Noriko had a quiet crush. Kiriyama is a sociopath with nothing behind his eyes but calculation. One by one, the island goes red. Some kids go feral. Others form alliances. Some pray. Some just sit down and wait for it to end. But the worst part isn't the killing. It's watching kindness unravel. Best friends hesitate. Lovers flinch. Cowards become kings. And heroes, they bleed first. Battle Royale isn't about who wins. It's about what breaks first, the body or the soul. It forces you to ask, what would you do? And you won't like the answer. Because this isn't fiction anymore. It's a mirror. One held up to every system that feeds you fear, every screen that turns suffering into spectacle, every rule that says, if you want peace, obey without question. Blindsight. We made contact. Not with flying saucers, not with peace signs. Just a flash in the sky, a signal. And then, silence. So we send a crew. A linguist who can't feel empathy. A biologist with multiple personalities. A soldier mostly made of metal. And a vampire. Yes, a vampire. Because in this future, they were real. Genetically revived apex predators, until we killed them off again when they became inconvenient. Now we need them, because something is out there, and it does not think like us. Blindsight is pure brain twist horror, the kind where nothing is evil and everything is alien. The crew approaches the object, Rorschach, a nightmare of metal curling in on itself like a tumor in space, and what they find inside is worse than death. It's indifference. The creatures inside don't care about us. They don't hate us. They don't even recognize us as alive. Because intelligence, consciousness, empathy, these are human things. And maybe completely unnecessary. The big question of Blindsight is chilling. What if sentience is a glitch? What if awareness is just mental static? A biological fluke that makes us inefficient, emotional, and ultimately doomed. The aliens out there, they think faster, react better, adapt quicker, because they don't think at all. And as the ship's crew begins to fracture, paranoia, hallucinations, breakdowns, you realize the enemy isn't some big alien monster. It's the idea that we don't matter, that everything we built, language, love, self, is just noise in the void. Blindsight doesn't give you comfort. It doesn't tell you we're special. It just shines a cold light on the dark and says, look, something's moving. It's smarter than you, and it doesn't care you're watching. By the time the final logs are sent back to Earth, you'll want to scream, but no one's listening. And even if they were, they wouldn't understand. The meat. Welcome to Ebern. The town's quiet, gray, miserable, but every single person here eats meat. Only meat. There are no plants, no farms, just slabs. Endless red slabs. Because meat isn't just food anymore. It's religion, it's law, it's survival. And those who refuse it, they're outcasts, filthy, dangerous, possibly even heretics. But here's what no one says out loud. No one knows where the meat comes from. There's a facility, big, sealed, industrial. Workers go in, trucks come out. And the butchers, the priests of this town, guard it with a fervor that looks more like fanaticism than faith. And then one man gets curious. Thomas, a slaughter man with doubts, a flicker of guilt, a whisper of morality, and like a bone jammed in the throat of the system, he starts asking questions. That's when the town starts to rot. What meat does so well is weaponize normal. It takes the simple act of eating and stretches it into a cultural horror show, where your dinner plate is sacred, your appetite is enforced, and compassion is treason. When you learn what the meat actually is, you don't gasp, you gag, because it's not just about cannibalism. It's about institutionalized cannibalism, systematized, sanitized, preached from pulpits, and written into law. No one remembers how it started. They just know that stopping it would collapse everything. The horror of meat isn't the blood, it's the obedience. The way people will abandon empathy if the tradition is old enough. The way they'll worship cruelty if it keeps them fed. And the way they'll tear you apart if you dare say, maybe this isn't right. Tender is the flesh. The animals are gone, not extinct, infected. Their meat is toxic, their breath dangerous. At least that's what the government says. So society adapts. How? Simple. They legalize cannibalism. But don't call it that. It's not people. It's special meat. Bred in facilities, skinned in clean rooms, packaged and sold like luxury cuts of steak. And Marcos? He runs the factory. Tender as the flesh doesn't hold your hand. It takes you by the jaw and forces you to look at the farms, the process, the normalization of the unthinkable. Babies raised without names, limbs sliced with surgical detachment, and conversations where morality isn't just missing, it's outlawed. Marcos isn't a villain. He's numb, broken. His wife is gone, his father fading, and his job? Pretending he's still human while handling corpses that talk. Until one day, he's given a gift. A female specimen, alive, breathing, meant for consumption. But Marcos doesn't butcher her. He hides her, feeds her, talks to her, and eventually loves her. Or thinks he does, because in this world, even love is warped. Even kindness comes with cost. And when the system finds cracks, it doesn't repair them, it punishes. The brilliance of this book isn't the shock, it's the ease, the way people adjust, how quickly the horror becomes protocol, how language erases empathy, units instead of humans, processing instead of murder. It's a world where compliance is comfort, and anyone who remembers the before is treated like a threat. By the final page, you'll feel sick, not just at what Marcos does, but at how much of our world is already there, how profit so easily replaces principle, how language can wash blood clean, how love can still be twisted by a system that eats everything, even hope. The Salammbô. Carthage is burning, not yet in flames, but something worse, a rot from within. Gold spills through the streets, perfume hangs in the air, and corpses, so many corpses, stack up in the corners like forgotten trophies. This isn't a war, this is a massacre dressed like opera, and at the center of it stands Salammbô, daughter of a high priest, a living idol draped in silk and ritual, untouchable, unreal. But one man stares too long. Matho, a mercenary, raised by blood, fueled by madness. He sees her and loses his soul. He storms the temple, touches the sacred veil, and suddenly, religion, politics, lust, and vengeance all twist together like a poison snake. What follows is war, but not the kind you've seen. Here, soldiers fight for gods they barely understand. Cities burn over jewels. Thousands die for pride. And blood seeps into wine as feasts continue. Because in this world, violence isn't horror, it's art. Flaubert didn't write Salammbô to comfort. He wrote it to intoxicate. Every sentence drips with color, with detail, with cruelty. Limbs are hacked off like sculpture. Elephants scream as they're set on fire, and the sacred is always just a breath away from the obscene. Matho is deranged. Salammbô is a symbol. And the gods? They never answer. The darkest part isn't the death. It's that all of this, every ritual, every atrocity, every drop of spilled blood, is done in the name of order. Because when civilization becomes theater, cruelty becomes choreography, and you clap without even realizing it. By the end, Salammbô returns to the temple. The city chants, the blood still dries, and the veil is lifted one final time. But don't blink, because that moment, gorgeous, grotesque, glorious, isn't meant to be understood, only witnessed, and then forgotten, like all things holy. All tomorrows. The human race leaves Earth. We spread across the stars, colonize, thrive, adapt. We become 1,000 versions of ourselves, some with gills, some with wings, some who no longer even look human. And for a moment, it feels like we've made it. Then the Q arrive, an alien empire, not evil, just methodical. They don't want to destroy us. They want to improve us. They tear through the galaxy like gardeners. They don't conquer. They re-engineer. Each branch of humanity is rewritten like clay, and the results are horrifying. One race becomes limbless breeders, grown like crops. Another is fused with dirt, fed through roots. One species is redesigned to love their masters, while others are turned into blind worms, fattened for slaughter. But the Q don't hate us. They think they're helping. And that's the horror. All Tomorrows is a cosmic tragedy told across 1 billion years, a history of suffering, of unnatural evolution, of beings who once called themselves human, now staring blankly into red suns with no memory of Earth. But here's the twist. They don't die, not all of them. Some adapt, endure, rebel, and in time, after the Q vanish, after eons of pain, a few descendants remember, not who they were, but that they were. The story isn't about survival, it's about transformation, about what happens when your body, your culture, your soul is rewritten so many times that nothing original remains, except the urge to know. My absolute darling. Her name is Turtle. She sleeps with a pistol under her pillow. Not because she's afraid of the outside world, because she's afraid of the man who taught her how to survive it. Turtle is 14. She moves through the forest like smoke. She can kill, clean, and conceal like she was born in camouflage. Her hands are steady, her aim is flawless. But those aren't survival skills. They're chains. Because Turtle isn't just being raised. She's being crafted by her father, Martin, a man who sees the end of the world around every corner, who thinks tenderness is weakness, who wraps his violence in poetry and dares to call it love. He teaches her philosophy, he teaches her fear, and worst of all, he teaches her to think she deserves it. There are no ghosts in this story, no supernatural horror. The cabin is real, the abuse is real, and the slow psychological strangulation of Turtle's life is so well written that you start to feel it in your own chest. Not because of what's shown, but because of what's never spoken. The silence between bruises, the dread between sentences, and then she meets people. A joke, a moment of awkward kindness, a human connection, and suddenly her world, built from obedience and bone, begins to tremble. Like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't born to survive under someone else's fist. But freedom? Freedom isn't a sunrise. It's not a movie montage. It's ugly. It's bleeding. It's a gun shaking in her hand. It's the realization that everything she knows might be a lie. And still, she fights. She claws her way out of the dark, barefoot and terrified, with only one thing keeping her moving: the terrifying idea that she might actually deserve better. My Absolute Darling is one of the darkest books you'll ever read because it forces you to sit with powerlessness, to feel how hard it is to escape when the monster is the only person who ever said they loved you. And when Turtle finally reclaims her story, It doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like a girl gasping for air after nearly drowning in someone else's idea of love. The remainder, a man falls from the sky. We don't know how, neither does he. There was an incident, we're told. A piece of architecture or machine, something heavy, something sharp, came loose and destroyed part of his brain. The details, sealed under non-disclosure. All he's left with is a body that moves like it's been borrowed, a mind glitching through moments like a scratched CD, and then he gets a payout. £8.5 million. Enough to rebuild reality, literally. Because this man, who doesn't know himself, doesn't trust memory, doesn't feel real, decides to spend his wealth reconstructing the past. Not his past, just a past. He buys a building and populates it with actors. He pays people to cook liver and scratch their heads and open windows at the exact same time every day. Over and over. A man walks down the stairs. A woman listens to music. A cat moves across the roof. And he watches. He absorbs. He adjusts until every flicker of light, every scuff on the floor, matches the version in his head. This isn't art, it's madness. But also, it's honest. Because Remainder is about what it means to be you when memory doesn't work. When trauma has rewired your brain so badly that nothing feels real unless it's reenacted. He doesn't want fantasy. He wants certainty. He wants cause, effect, repetition, meaning. But that hunger escalates from peaceful memories to violent ones, to darker, more visceral recreations that involve blood, death, even murder. Not for power, not for thrill, for authenticity. Because how do you know you're alive if nothing feels like it matters? That's the horror of Remainder. At Sematary, the road doesn't care. It doesn't slow down for grief. It doesn't blink for innocence. It just keeps moving. Tires spinning, blood soaking into the gravel. And for Dr. Lewis Creed, that road takes everything. A new house, a new start, a beautiful family. But just behind the woods, something waits. An old path, carefully hidden, leading to a strange, ancient burial ground where the soil is sour, where death isn't permanent, where what comes back isn't what left. When the family cat dies, it returns, but colder, wrong. Its eyes not quite feline anymore. And when Lewis's toddler son dies, taken by that same indifferent road, he does the unthinkable. He buries him there. Because grief isn't logical. It's desperate. It doesn't care about warnings or history. It just wants the pain to stop. But pain doesn't stop. It transforms. What comes back from that soil isn't a miracle. It's a message. A cruel echo of love twisted into something unrecognizable. A child that walks and talks, but whose smile doesn't reach its eyes, whose voice feels borrowed, whose return feels like a curse dressed in lullabies. And you, the reader, are dragged into that slow, suffocating realization that some doors, once open, don't shut, that some love, when stretched too far, becomes horror. Because Pet Sematary isn't about zombies. It's about the rot under the skin of perfect families. The kind of horror that doesn't chase you. It sits next to you at dinner, it wears your kids' pajamas, and it asks you to read it a bedtime story while holding a scalpel behind its back. Stephen King didn't write this book as entertainment. He shelved it, called it too dark, but it crawled back out like everything buried in that cursed ground. And when readers opened it, they weren't scared of monsters. They were scared of themselves, of what they'd do for one more moment with someone they lost, of how far they'd go to undo death. And the deeper fear? That they'd do exactly what Lewis did, and then lie to themselves that it was love. Geek Love. They made their own children, literally. The Banuski family runs a traveling carnival, but they're not just performers. They're curators of the grotesque. And in a twisted pursuit of fame and purity, the parents Al and Crystal Lil take drugs, radiation, and toxins during pregnancy, on purpose, to create children with birth defects, freaks as they proudly call them, and it works. Arturo has flippers for limbs. Iphigenia and Electra are Siamese twins. Chick has telekinetic powers. And Olympia, our narrator, is a bald albino hunchback dwarf. But this isn't a horror story about deformity. It's about what happens when family becomes a cult. Because Arturo, the golden boy with fins, turns his siblings into followers. He preaches about self-mutilation, about the beauty of sacrificing body parts to reach spiritual enlightenment. And people listen. People follow. They give up fingers, arms, eyes for him. And Olympia, she loves him. Even as he chips away at everything around them. Even as the carnival transforms from stage act into religion. Even as her body is used. Her voice silenced. Her identity twisted into obedience. Geek Love is sickening not because of what's done, but because of what's believed. The idea that love is pain, that loyalty means surrender, that family can redefine reality and call it devotion. And at the center of it is Olympia, a girl born into a circus, taught to smile through cruelty, to mistake abuse for affection, to protect the very people who destroyed her. But this isn't just tragedy, it's prophecy. Because Olympia isn't just a freak, she's a mother. And when her own daughter enters the world, you start to wonder, will the cycle break? Or will it continue, draped in sequins and applause? Dunn's novel shoves your face into the mud of identity, body autonomy, and inherited trauma. It whispers, you think your family's messed up? Look closer. The Willows. It starts with a river, 2 men, a canoe, open sky, and the gentle hush of water sliding past ancient trees. But then the river widens, and the trees change. They pass into a desolate stretch of wilderness where nature doesn't feel alive. It feels aware. The willows crowd around them, not aggressively, not violently, just watching, listening, leaning in a little too close. And then the ground begins to shift. Literally. Islands vanish overnight. Sandbars crumble. The map stops matching the world around them. Welcome to the Willows. A story where nothing actually jumps out. Nothing screams. No monsters chase you through the dark. But something watches you. Something judges you. Something waits until you stop pretending you're in control. Because the horror here is cosmic, ancient, silent. The men find strange markings in the sand. Pyramids, symbols, tracks that don't belong to any living thing. They hear sounds that make no sense, see shapes that move against the wind. And as days pass, their minds begin to bend. Not snap, just tilt. They start to believe the trees are alive, that the air has weight, that the land itself resents their presence, that they've stumbled into a place not meant for humans. A thin patch in the fabric of the world where something older, vaster, and entirely inhuman is brushing against our reality, and it doesn't want them there. The Willows is often called the greatest weird tale ever written, not because of jump scares, but because it erodes your sense of certainty. It strips away the illusion that the world is stable or safe or ours. Blackwood understood that true fear isn't about being chased. It's about being insignificant. Tiny men in a boat, drifting through a pocket of existence where human logic doesn't apply, where the rules you thought governed life, time, space, gravity, sanity, don't mean anything anymore. On the beach. The world ended 6 months ago. Nobody screamed, fought, even noticed, because they were already gone. The missiles fell, the sky turned black, and the silence rolled in like a tide. Radioactive, invisible, absolute. Now all that's left is a ticking clock, and one last corner of the world waiting to die. Welcome to Australia. In On the Beach, death isn't fast. It's not dramatic. It's slow, deliberate, sterile, like someone turned down the volume on humanity. A U.S. submarine captain, Dwight, docks in Melbourne, a city still untouched by fallout, but not for long. The radiation is drifting south. No one will be spared. They know it. They've done the math. And yet, people live. They plant gardens, throw dinner parties, talk about fishing, gas shortages, and how nice the weather's been. A woman named Moira drinks too much and falls in love too late. A young couple has a baby they'll never see grow up. They are not delusional. They are not brave. They are just human. And as the days count down, the government starts distributing suicide pills, quietly, like aspirin. No big announcement, no panic. Just a polite little envelope that says, "Here, when you're ready." That's the horror. Not fire or monsters, but how normal the end becomes. Because On the Beach doesn't give you war. It gives you after. It gives you the numb space where no one screams, because screaming doesn't matter anymore. And yet, it hits harder than any dystopia, because we've all imagined it. The last coffee, the last goodbye, the last time you pretend the world is fine. And Chute doesn't flinch. He lets you sit there, in the silence, watching families go for walks, watching the wind carry death closer. This isn't a book, it's a forum. Anonymous usernames, pixelated pictures, pages that read like dark corners of the internet you probably shouldn't click. At first, it's about sex, escorts, reviews, who's hot, who's fake, who's available. A man named Brad appears, beautiful, submissive, damaged. And like vultures to roadkill, the users swarm. But as the threads pile up, something shifts. Stories contradict each other. Details change. Some say Brad was beaten. Others say he liked it. Some claim he's dead. Others swear they saw him last week. Reality bends. Truth melts. And the reader becomes just another voyeur, addicted, guessing, doubting everything. Because this isn't about Brad. It's about us, the watchers, the posters, the ones refreshing the page for more pain dressed up as pleasure. And that's the horror, the blurring of lines between obsession and affection, between fantasy and footage, between "that's messed up" and "send the link." Dennis Cooper turns the internet into a haunted house, not with ghosts, but with people, hungry, horny, cruel, hiding behind usernames while passing around trauma like it's a meme. American Psycho. Patrick Bateman has a business card. That's all he really is. A name, embossed in bone white. Font, Cillian Rail. He has a perfect haircut, a perfect suit, a perfect life, and no soul. In American Psycho, horror doesn't wear a mask. It wears Armani. Bateman is a Wall Street investment banker. But that's just camouflage. His real obsession isn't money. It's control, skin, screams, the way a body comes apart when no one's watching. Or maybe when they are, and just don't care. He kills, then eats sushi. He dismembers women, then reviews albums. He is both predator and parody. A monster stitched together from 80s greed and cocaine dust, who speaks like a magazine ad and thinks like a void. But here's the terrifying part. No one notices. Not his colleagues, not his lovers, not even the cops. He blends in so perfectly with the other plastic men around him that his bloodstained trail looks like a cologne ad. Even his confessions are treated like jokes. Like maybe he didn't do any of it. Maybe it was all in his head. Or maybe reality is so numb, so hyper-stylized, that mass murder looks like another networking event. The genius of American Psycho is that you never quite know what's real. Did Bateman actually feed a stray cat to an ATM? Or is that just another crack in a consumer-driven mind that's rotted from the inside out? He's not a serial killer in the traditional sense. He's a mirror, held up to every reader, to every culture that prizes surface over substance, a culture that sells suffering as aesthetic, where a man can be handsome, rich, articulate, and completely hollow, and still be rewarded for it. There's a reason the book was banned, censored, burned. It isn't just the gore, it's the way it shows us how easy it is to become numb, to scroll past violence, to laugh at evil if it's dressed well enough. By the end, Bateman is still walking, still talking, still free, and all that's left is a blank wall and the words, "This is not an exit," because maybe he never existed, or maybe we're all just really good at pretending he doesn't.